On today's show, how did the LA Clippers lose this series to the Denver Nuggets? After I said we want Denver, gonna be talking about it all on today's Locked On Cancun Clippers.
You are Locked On Clippers, your daily Los Angeles Clippers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, sir. You are locking in with the Clips. Thank you for making Locked On Clippers the first listen of your day, your team every day. I'm your host, Darian Vaziri, born and raised in LA. In my 20th year as a Clipper fan, been covering the Clippers for 5 years on my own LA sports, basketball-centric YouTube channel, Dime Dropper, and Locked On Clippers right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Make sure you subscribe. Get us up to 8,000 subscribers and listen wherever you get your podcast. In this episode, we're going to be talking about why we lost the series to the Denver Nuggets, in my opinion. I put it down to the fine margins, the flaws in our roster, and, of course, we'll go through the blame pie that everybody loves so much. Now, let's talk about the fine margins. And when you think in an NBA series, in a best-of-7 series, that the best team always wins, it's pretty conclusive, but genuinely, I think this was a much closer series than what the Game 7 showed. And a couple of plays and a couple of moments to me somewhat decided this series, but also the approach to certain aspects of games, or not aspects, but moments of games really hurt us. I think the biggest one that stands out for me off the bat is game 4. You know, you do your job, you get that 2-1 lead, one more game left to take a 3-1 lead. You know how important that game is, because then you have to go back and win another game in Denver. And look, I love Intuit Dome. We went 2-1 with that home court. They went 3-1, and they had that home court advantage. And by the way, they had home court advantage because of the play-in game. They had an extra game in Denver. It was so whack. We had 3 games in Denver this past season. So Adam Silver has effectively hurt the Clippers in 2 playoff runs. 2022, not runs, but we could have made the playoffs that year. We would have in the traditional 1-8 format. And then this, but again, no excuses. It's kind of ridiculous. But, we had a chance to go up 3-1, and I just thought that game, we didn't come out with a killer instinct. We didn't come out with a sense of, let's stomp on them, get a 3-1 lead. We know they're going to come out desperate. Let's match their desperation. It was just clear that the Nuggets were more desperate. And I remember talking to fans at halftime. You can check it out on my vlog. Everybody was like, we're not playing that well, but we're only down by 2 points, right? It was 48-50. So we felt pretty good. But then in that third quarter, we come out and get punched in the mouth. And that's kind of reminiscent of game 7 as well. And that's not a good characteristic and that's, by the way, then that Denver Nuggets have shown, if you look at their series against the Lakers and even the 3-1 lead that we blew against them in the bubble, they're a second half team. Jamal Murray, Nikola Jokic, they're better in the second half. But us getting punched in the mouth like that 2 times in, pretty much must-win situations, game 4, game 7, that's no good. And a lot of it comes down to shot making. Our role players getting those open looks when James Harden and Kawhi Leonard got 2 thrown on the ball. I mean, I don't think shot quality was an issue for us at all in this series, truthfully. I think our role players were able to get tons of open looks, and I don't think they came through. But we also knew that throughout the course of the season, our three-point shooting was not great. I think we had some big games towards the end of the season with Bogey, with Kawhi, but the thing about the playoffs is guys that can't really play defense very well, say Bogey, they end up playing less, and it's hard to get a rhythm shooting the ball. So they oftentimes don't find that offensive rhythm. And so then your defenders, who maybe aren't as good as shooters, are the ones that are in the game and are not hitting. So that's why it's tough to find these guys that are great 3-point shooters and also fantastic defenders, the true 3-and-D guys, because Derrick Jones Jr. and Chris Dunn, they're not really good enough at the 3, in my opinion, to be considered great 3-and-D guys. So for me, the fine margins are the mentality that we came out with, in the second half, or just in game 4 in general. I thought it was not that of a team that understood that we need to go up 3-1, because if you had that kind of complacency, well, you better have gone to win in Denver, and you didn't. You got spanked in both games. We came out there in the third game and we're down double digits after the first quarter, never really got back in it, never really could string together stops. For how good our defense has been all season, we got cooked in game 5. It was 131 to 115. And then in game 7, to get destroyed like that. So, I think that's from that side of things. I think mentally we didn't have as much toughness as I expected. Secondly, there are a couple plays in games 4 and 1 that could have changed this series. And Denver is a really tough place to play, but they lost both games at home to the Minnesota Timberwolves last year. And maybe game 2 is completely different if we win game 1. That's the thing. You can't just assume that if the Clippers win game 1, that game 2 goes exactly the same with Kawhi doing that. I just think that every game changes the pattern of a series, and there's a desperation level that the Nuggets would have shown in that game 2 that they didn't show. So for me, game 4 is the one. And, there was some bad shots taken by Kawhi towards the end of that game. But the 3 balls, but the coaching staff, I still can't really overlook that defensive possession. And there is some truth to, that unit was defending well in that fourth quarter. But you have a stop that you need to force overtime when you have all the momentum in what's been the loudest moment of the season thus far at Into a Dome. And you have Bogdanovich, James Harden, and Norman Powell out there. No Nico Batum, no Derrick Jones Jr., no Chris Dunn, no Ben Simmons. It's something we can't overlook. And Ty Lue should get the most blame for that moment. Well, actually, no, Norman Powell, because he's on the court. He needs to box out. You can't complain about size unless you're boxing out. Norman Powell didn't rotate underneath the rim there on Aaron Gordon. And he's literally a great offensive rebounder, great putback guy. So we needed to be there. And we weren't. And Ty Lue gets the majority of the blame, I'd say, for that decision. But we have a coaching staff around us. For all the praise we gave Jeff Van Gundy, defensive guy, that was a defensive moment. And we needed that moment. So we didn't get it done. Absolutely hurts. Coming up, going to be talking about the flaws in our roster that were blatantly exposed. I got to tell you a little something about open phone. If you're running a business, you know that every missed call is money left on the table. Think about the last time you had an urgent need, maybe for a plumber or a service provider. If the first person didn't answer, did you wait? Probably not. You moved on. That's why you need Open Phone. Open Phone is a #1 business phone system built to streamline and scale your customer communications, all from an app on your phone or computer. The shared inbox feature is a game changer. Your team can jump into any conversation instantly without missing a beat. Open Phone is offering my listeners 20% off your first 6 months at openphone.com/lockedonnba. That's openphone.com/lockedonnba. And if you have existing numbers with another service, Open Phone will port them over at no extra charge. Open Phone, no missed calls, no missed customers. All right. So the LA Clippers lose in the first round in 7 games to the Denver Nuggets, 4-3. Now, if you want to look at the season before it started, I think we absolutely overachieved. People had us as low as 12th in the West. FanDuel had me on the lowest tier of season previews or whatever, before the season, and everybody was making fun of me. I was with the Jazz. It's funny the Rockets were in there with me. It was the Rockets, Jazz, Blazers, Spurs, and us. And it's funny because the Blazers ended up ended up being in there. The Jazz ended up being in there, and the Spurs did. But the other two teams were the New Orleans Pelicans and the Phoenix Suns. I think they put Phoenix in the contenders preview. Anyway, so funny. But we overachieved. However, a lot of the overachieving stems from knowing or not knowing how many games Kawhi was going to play. I think a lot of people would tell you if you put Kawhi on that team before the season, we're thinking, definitely 45 plus wins, maybe 50 wins, because it's a really solid defensive team. You got a good big three, or really, a lot of people didn't know about if it's Zubats the way they do now, but James Harden, Kawhi Leonard, Zoo, Norm, good defensive pieces. It's a good roster. But they have some flaws, and the roster did have some flaws. Going back to last year, we said that we needed a power forward. There were a lot of people that didn't want Kawhi Leonard to play the three. And I had said that Kawhi is pretty good, as that low man, showing help underneath the basket, rebounding, doing the dirty work. But this series, he wasn't quite good enough for that. Or he did. For some people, they want to say he didn't have the legs. Here's the thing. I want to make it very clear. He was better than James Harden guarding Aaron Gordon. But I don't think that around the basket, he cleaned things up well enough and was as much of a deterrent as in previous years at all. And there is a level of Denver Nuggets offense that's really good there. That's a part of that. But I think it makes a lot more sense that Kawhi Leonard doesn't have to do the dirty work as much. After all, I don't think he's the same player that he is in 2021. And believe it or not, I'm trying to be off Twitter more these first couple of weeks of the Clipper off season, just for my own sake. But I saw a video of 2019 Kawhi ISO highlights in the playoffs. It looks like a different player. How fast he is, how much more twitch he has, and how much quicker he's getting to his spots. Everything just looks faster, quicker. He looks more athletic. And, it should make sense. He's been through a torn meniscus. He's been through a torn ACL. And I think what it comes down to is you don't notice it in the efficiency, but you notice it in all the shots he doesn't get off and the offensive motor. So, and the defensive responsibility that the coaches assign him. There was a desperation level in 2021 where we said Clippers are not switching Kawhi Leonard off of Luka. And there was never a moment where we were like, you know what? Kawhi's going to guard Jamal Murray the entire quarter. It was like a little bit of a first quarter, I think a game 5. And we need to try to go out. If we're going to run this team back, we're going to need to get a bigger 4 and not just Nico, who's old. You know what I'm saying? Someone a little bit younger can clean things up. So that was a flaw in our roster. The second one, I don't know if it's necessarily a flaw in our roster. Well, it is, but it's hard to address. We didn't have enough good three-point shooters in terms of role players. We weren't one of the better three-point shooting teams in the NBA this season. And as far as looking at what we shot in the playoffs, I'm just going to look at individual guys right now. Let's take a look. Ben Simmons is a non-shooter, and Ivica Zubac is a non-shooter. So in the 9 guys that played, and by the way, I didn't mention this enough. I mentioned it once. Did Amir Coffey should he have gotten minutes? Because he was shooting the 3-ball well for us this season. However, he's not a good off-ball defender. So not being a good off-ball defender would have hurt us against the Nuggets, who move without the ball very well. But let's just start with the fact that we have 2 non-shooters out of those 9 right off the bat. Okay? If you look at Kawhi's team that won a ring, All 8 players could shoot threes, and a lot of them can shoot the mid-range. Marc Gasol, 3 levels, to be honest with you. Maybe not as much mid-range when he was at Toronto, but with us, I mean, we know more than anyone. Marc Gasol's turnaround mid-range was crazy. He did not go to it enough. Serge Ibaka, pick and pop, 18-footer. He had since OKC, stretched it out to the 3. So 2 stretch bigs. We had only 1 big, and it's not a stretch big. Norman Powell, great shooter. Fred VanVleet. He's gotten more streaky over the years with added responsibility, but as a 6th man, he was elite. Could hit, you know the range he has. Kyle Lowry, big-time range. Danny Green went cold, but the teams respect him as a shooter, and I would take him as a shooter all day long over the Derrick Joneses and the Chris Dunns of the world. And then you've got Siakam, who probably was the worst three-point shooter of the bunch at the time, but he had the mid-range, he had the floater, he could get to the rim, and he's huge. He can handle the ball. That was a very good team, and I said that in the moment. Now, I'm not trying to compare that team to this one because that team crushes this team. But when I look at it, they still had shooting, much more than we did. Bogdan Bogdanovic shot 29% from 3 in this series. 29% from 3. He got 17 minutes a game, which is not a lot, but that's about right for the playoffs, the way he was playing. 29% from 3 and 36% from the field is not good enough. So it's safe to say that outside of the fourth quarter of game 4 and some moments in games 5 and 7, Bogey just wasn't good enough. He just wasn't good enough. And I mean, I've flip-flopped back and forth on that Terrence trade a lot. Obviously, in the beginning, I was like, you know what? Good trade. But I'm emotional about Terrence, but good trade. Then I was like, bad trade because Bogey wasn't hitting. And I was like, Terrence could have given us more than this because Terrence was playing well for Atlanta. And then Bogey starts hitting and going crazy and having games where he's contributing to the fact that our three-point percentage is looking better than it has all season long. And I was like, man, another ball handler. This is perfect. Another shot creator. I was like, we definitely won this trade, especially with the second-round picks we got back. And now in the playoffs, I'm like, man, could playoff Terrence, who always rose during his, rose with his performance during the playoffs, been better than this? I don't know. So I'm not happy with Bogey's performance in this series. I love Bogey as a guy. I think he did a great job integrating with the fan base, but wasn't happy with it. Derrick Jones Jr., he shot 30% from 3. 30%. And I love Derrick Jones Jr. But during the season, he shot 36%. In the playoffs last year, in 22 games, he shot 37. He shot 30% in 18 minutes. But I also think, with Dallas, for example, he didn't actually shoot more attempts, but it's a larger sample size. He was 3.0 in attempts, three attempts a game from 3 in last year's playoffs. And then with us, 2.9. So 0.1 difference. However, it's 7 games, which is 22 games. And he's getting 11 more minutes in the games with Dallas last year in the playoffs. So to me, we got a little too married to Chris Dunn. And that was something that we saw. It's not a roster flaw, but it was a coaching flaw, I think. And I love Chris Dunn. But the guy had never been part of a meaningful team before this in the NBA ever because of his lack of offense. So to go from that to starter on a team that has championship aspirations is a little too big of a jump. I love Chris Dunn. I think in the regular season, he did his job. But you know what? We got to look at, of course, bringing him back and having him next year, but bench player. I think we go with Derek start. I mean, don't flip-flop based on matchup. Like, stick with one. Just stick with one, I think, personally. So, Derrick Jones Jr., I think the rhythm thing mattered a little bit too, but no excuses. He's got to knock down shots, and he did not perform when it comes to that. And then Norman Powell, 35% from 3 after shooting, 42% during the season? Yeah, 42%. I mean, that's a big drop-off. And I think rhythm has to do with that a little bit as well. But, he would just jack some shots that aren't playoff shots. And James Harden, 36%. That's about on cue. Nico, 39% was good. Kawhi, 40.5%. Kawhi shot the best from 3 of anyone. The other 3 guys were guys that got only minutes in garbage time. Patty Mills, Kobe Brown, Cam Christie. So our shooting wasn't good enough. And then we didn't have a backup big. And that really hurt us, in my opinion, because that small ball wasn't always reliable, where, it wasn't always reliable. That small ball when we don't have um, a backup center option. Drew Eubanks wasn't the answer, and we all knew that. So there was some flaws in this roster. And then as far as not enough shot creation, I don't know about that. I mean, teams with Harden, because he has so much, he likes having the ball so much, and because he's such a good on-ball creator, they put guys that can hit shots around him, which they didn't do, but they also need to put defenders around him. So it makes team building a little bit harder, right? So I've seen each set of stands kind of going at each other, Harden and Kawhi. I think the blame pie, perfect place to go next. So we're going to be talking about that coming up. All right. So the Clippers losing in 7 to the Denver Nuggets. I said we want Denver. And you know what really hurts is that this series, I said that they would have a harder time guarding us than us guarding them. And, I think both sides got good looks, but I think playing in a movement offense and an offense with off-ball movement, with a high post hub, a great passer as your number one option, and then your number two, I think, and I think Harden's better than Murray. But the thing about Murray is his shot profile is very diverse. In the playoffs, that translates well, because in the playoffs, every team knows your flaws and they can try to get the ball out of your hands. He has the ability to score from everywhere on the court, going both directions, pull up on a dime, going both ways. That makes him not a better scorer than Harden, but more versatile scorer in terms of the playoffs. And Harden created a lot of good shots for our guys, but as I said, the shooting wasn't good enough, and we got exposed to the lack of a 4 because Kawhi just didn't seem. I mean, we need someone a little bit younger, a little more spry for Aaron Gordon, in my opinion, and especially with what he has to shoulder on the offensive side. And then I think we also just didn't get enough chemistry with Norman Powell and Kawhi Leonard over the course of a full season. I think the sample size was honestly too small in the end, and Norm never became the best version of himself for an extended stretch. And when I say extended, I mean like 10 plus games. And it was just, tough. So Kawhi Leonard, it just didn't feel like we had integrated into Kawhi Leonard's team. And I talked about this when we were struggling before that 18-3 stretch. I said, it doesn't feel like we've kind of shifted given the reins over to Kawhi from Harden. But the thing was, I said Harden would be our bigger advantage in this series, and he created a ton of good shots. The guys just didn't make them, so that was a problem. And then also, I think Harden didn't play well enough in games 5 and 7, and really the first 3 quarters of 4, and that hurt us. So when it comes to the blame pie, see, this is where everybody's going to disagree with me, but this is just the way I evaluate basketball. It's not a personal thing. I think Kawhi Leonard's the most to blame, but also did the best, if that makes sense, which people just can't make sense of that. But my thing is, when you are the highest paid player on the team and you are the guy that has the reputation of being the killer, the guy in the playoffs, playoff Kawhi, 2 championships, 2 finals MVPs, one of the best small forwards to ever play the game, the expectations are high. And when you look at the stats, you say 25 points, 8 rebounds, 5 assists, 1 steal, 1 block on 54, 40 and a half, 78 splits. Dude, you are out of your mind. You absolute idiot. Well, let me just say this. Let's begin and break down those statistics. First of all, let me just ask the question to everybody. What matters more? Your stat line looking good or winning a game? Is it a team sport or is it not? Because I don't like the way we have transformed, and this is a player stand thing. We have taken the words team sport and used that as an excuse for players who people feel as though did not get enough help from their supporting cast, as opposed to looking at it as, did that player do enough for themselves, given their role, and the team to elevate the others to accomplish the team goal? Now, I know what you might be asking to that. Does that mean that, in your opinion, Darian, nobody that loses a series can have played well? No. And I think Kawhi played well. I just don't think he played great. And we needed great. Because did James Harden play great? No, he played well. You can't expect James Harden to play great in the series. And I'll let you know, I expected James Harden to have a good series, but I didn't expect him to play great in the big games. And Kawhi, I think, just played well. And a lot of the people are going to say the double. Let's start with the 25 points a game thing. We needed 30. You know what I'm saying? We needed damn near 30. 25 was not enough. If you had asked me, you think you're going to win the series if Kawhi averages 25 points a game on efficient shooting? I would have said 25 might not be enough. That's what I genuinely would have said. It's not just about efficiency. I think you got to empty the clip sometimes. And yes, that means force some shots. Game 5 and Game 7 needed some more forcing. We needed him to work. People are always saying he was double teamed. He was triple teamed. Guys, if he catches the ball inside the arc like he was in Game 6 and makes quick moves before the double comes and before the defense can load up, that's how he can get shots off. They might not be the easiest shots, but he's a tough shot maker. At this point, it was like, it's do or die. We can't have the ball going to Derrick Jones Jr., to the Chris Dunns so much. We need him to just keep shooting. 39 shots is what he took in Game 7 against the Sixers in 2019. And I'm fully convinced that a lot of it's because he just cannot get those same shots off. And it's taxing on his body, to constantly work for post position, like what I'm saying. Because a lot of times he would get pushed out to the 3-point line to get the ball. And that's not, then the defense can load up. He's going to have to be forced to take a contested 3, which he doesn't like taking too many of those. But he likes taking them more in rhythm. So he just didn't force shots to me, which some people think is a good thing. And I do think it's a good thing depending on who you are and time and situation. But it was the time for him to be more aggressive. 8 rebounds is good. I just think there were moments in games that, like even in Game 7, that beginning of the third quarter, the miscommunications on D, there was a lack of boxing out at a lot of times this series. So, and you got to watch the tape for that. That does not go in the stat sheet. The amount of rebounds you get does not show the amount of rebounds you don't get. And it also does not show defense at all. And again, not saying Kawhi's defense was bad, but for the reputation that he has and for what the expectation has become, it wasn't a big enough impact in terms of on-ball defense. And then the 5 assists, 5 to 2 assist to turnover ratio, not great. And we know that that's one of the flaws in Kawhi's game. That he doesn't process the double quickly enough and see the open man quickly enough. However, I think a lot of that this series, he did a pretty good job of. Guys just didn't make shots, but he's not as good as Jokic in that regard. And that definitely makes it so that they get easier looks than we get. And their spacing just makes more sense. They have Gordon the dunker, who's a great vertical threat. They have MPJ in the opposite corner, and they have Murray and Brown. And their role players made shots. But again, they had more home games, and role players play better at home. So I think for me, Kawhi, he gets the most. And then after I go to Harden, because that performance in Game 7 was just absolutely ridiculous. I mean, 8 shots, 2 for 8. That's insane. And Kawhi Leonard only taking 13 shots. It's not good enough. And then I would put it after that on Norman Powell. Norman Powell, and plus with James Harden, a lot of it's the effort too in that second half was just, he looked defeated. And then not talking to media post game was ridiculous. But Norman Powell, we needed better. And he shot a lot. And 12 shots, a guy that's shooting 12 shots a game is not playing defense at a very high level. You're going to need more. And then I would say the role players. And I don't think I would blame the coach over any of those guys, but then I would go the coach. And that's where people are going to disagree with me, but whatever. I'm not a coach. I'm not a guy that blames the coach over the players. We had a chance to do a lot of things. But anyways, that's my opinion of this. That's why we lost the series. But we'll have more to talk about how we can improve this team. Where do we go next? I guess that'll be the next episode. But you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Dime Dropper Pod. Subscribe to my own YouTube channel, Dime Dropper, for even more LA Clipper and LA sports content. And Locked On Clippers is free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube. And Locked On NBA Game Night. Check that out. Every game, every night until an NBA champion is crowned. Get local analysis on a national scale. Find NBA Game Night on Locked On NBA with some of our best hosts. The age-old proverb continues. Go Clippers.